We are live. Hello, friend.
Hello, how are you?
I am so good. I am better now because I get to be here with you. So, welcome to episode 2 of Courageous Love podcast, broadcast, whatever you want to call it. I am so excited to have you on. When I was praying about this podcast and when I was like digging deep, God gave me the list of people and he gave them to me in order. And you were number 2 on the list. I was on a plane.
Here I am.
You are here. I'm so excited to be hanging out with you and chatting with you. We have a rich conversation in store for all of our viewers. So I'm so excited. But before we hop in, I want to tell you a little bit about my friend. Today, we are talking with Carla Hayden. And if the first time I met her was on a stage, I was giving a talk and I looked down and there's this beautiful woman in front of me. And it was immediate, like kindred spirits. Like, Carla, I could feel your spirit and your love and your light from the stage. And I was so glad to have it because I needed it. I needed some courage standing up there. So Carla is a faithful, loving, so wise, powerful woman of God. She is a maturity coach helping you remove roadblocks and obstacles on your way to being a grown-up in marriage, motherhood, ministry, and in the marketplace. She is also the COO of Hopewriters, which is a community of working writers dedicated to helping you make progress as you learn to balance the art of writing with business, of publishing. She is a mom. You're a fellow coffee drinker like me, but tonight we have tea. And I picked this cup out for you because you're the boss.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're so welcome. So today we are going to talk about your unwavering faith. We're going to talk about your quarterly business retreats. We are going to talk about your journey through maturity, pruning, and abundance. Carla, thank you so much for being here.
Oh my gosh, Amber, it's truly my honor to be here. What an amazing way to spend my evening with you, with your community here, with the Courageous Love community. I'm so excited about our conversation.
It's going to be awesome. Anything else you want to share with the audience before we hop into the topic tonight?
Oh gosh, well, lover of coffee, dark chocolate, red wine, Irish whiskey. My top 1 love language is gifts. So feel free to send me things. I love doing unboxings on Instagram. All the things. There's so many things we could talk about. My one bucket list item of mine is that I want to do my own version of Eat, Pray, Love in Italy. I want to do like 90 days in Italy because it has everything that a girl needs and wants. It's pasta, pizza, wine, coffee, the seashore, all the things. History.
All of it. You're an Enneagram 8.
I am a healthy Enneagram 8. Excuse me. Yes. I've taken every personality test there is. You want to know what my Disney princess is? I can tell you.
Okay. Just for giggles, which one is she?
Apparently, I'm Merida from Brave, which should surprise nobody who knows Enneagram 8. But I'm like, am I really? But we'll go with it. If that's what it says, that's what it says.
Awesome. Oh, Carla, like, I wish that people could understand how, like, I want to pick you up and put you in my pocket and carry you with me everywhere, because I don't know how people ever feel down or depressed or have a bad day with you in their presence, because you just illuminate God's light and love. And I just love to spend time with you. The last time we were together, we literally were together for 3.5 hours and I'm not even sure where the time went. Like, we just talked and talked.
No, I know. We've said this since day one. It was like we just locked eyes with each other and it was like, okay, we're friends now, by the way. And just whether it was over Zoom or in person, the energy is mutual, you and me, back and forth.
Yes. And God knows what he's doing when he's putting people together. And you are one of those people for me that I just know it was meant. And because your name had come up several times before the event, you have to meet Carla. You have to meet Carla. And I'm like, okay, who's Carla? And there you are, front row and front center, cheering me on, helping me get through that night. And so I'm excited to have you here and dive in on some pretty exciting but heavy stuff, because as humans, we are going through a lot, especially in the last couple of years, right? Because now we're like into year 2 of this crazy. And a lot of conversations come up around, finding purpose, digging in, figuring out how to live a full life. And when I think of someone that lives a full life, that's you, my friend. You are such an abundant person, but I am not naive to think that you didn't have some rough roads behind you in order to get you to that place. So, do you mind if we jump into your journey of maturity and pruning?
Sure. Yeah.
Tell us kind of where that began. Where did that process for you start, where you really started to recognize this is what I'm going through? Or maybe it was reflection. You were going through it and then look back and go, oh, that's what God was trying to teach me. Let's start there.
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that's the case for a lot of people. I don't think I've met or know of anybody that has had a storied life. I think some of us have a few more scrapes and bumps and bruises than others. And oftentimes that's the fertile soil for God to do his work in our lives of maturity. And, when we think about maturity from a biblical perspective, we're talking about God planting seeds within our heart and bringing those to fruition. But we have an enemy who is out to steal, kill, and destroy, and is doing everything he can to uproot those seeds, to make sure that those seeds don't ever come to fruition, to grow up wheat and tares and, weeds alongside those seeds. And so, a lot of times that happens in the course of your childhood. Maybe you didn't have a great childhood. You had traumatic situations happen or tragedies that would cause you to not necessarily grow and mature into the person that God has created you to be. And a lot of times we can hide behind our worldly success. We can hide behind our status symbol in society, or our money, or, just whatever that looks like, and never really get in touch with that true identity of who we are created in Christ. And so I think for me, a lot of that manifested in just my personality and maybe my natural intelligence or my gift mix growing up. And so I was able to hide behind getting good grades. I was able to hide behind perfectionism or performance, or serving even, so here's the thing, like for me, I didn't hide behind, or I didn't try to mask pain or manage pain through socially unacceptable means. I did it through socially acceptable means. And the problem with that is that you get affirmed in those things. And so then it's like, well, it's not really a problem then, is it? Because everybody's pleased with me and I'm having an impact and I'm influencing and I'm helping and I'm being promoted and all the things. And the reality is I always say, if you don't deal with your stuff is going to come back to deal with you. That's just the reality. I mean, it's this image of sweeping things under a rug. Well, where does that go? There's not like a trap door where that stuff just drops out. It's still under there. And eventually it starts to back up and come out. And so I think for me, one really specific instance in my life where I noticed that maturity and the pruning was happening was through a difficult season that I went through. Probably it started about 10 years ago. Our family just went through a really difficult season. Some church wounding, some career disappointment, some, you're raising kids and they're just not being everything they, you're like, why can't you just sit there and do nothing, just life happens and stuff happens in marriage. And so I was married and we got to the point where individually the stuff that we hadn't dealt with started dealing with us. And when you combine that in a relationship with two people who are dealing with maturity issues in their own selves and then not knowing how to deal with it with each other, stuff happens and bad decisions were made. Hard words were exchanged, you name it. And so what ended up happening was we got to the point where it was a volatile situation and he didn't make great choices. I equally did not make great choices. And one of the things that I am completely convinced of is that we have to be able to own our own stuff. And we have to be able to say, yep, that was 100% my fault of the things that was within my power, right? It's not a 50-50 thing. It's 100%. And really it's having God's perspective of the situation. And so the long and short of it is, I thought we were on our way to reconciliation. We really did everything that we could, I believe, within human means to reconcile for about a year, counseling, all the things. It got to the point where he did not feel like he could reconcile. He didn't feel like he wanted to work on the marriage. And so he ended up taking some time apart. We were separated. And then after a period of time, about a year, came back and said, I can't do it. I don't have anything in me. And in that period of time, I had hit rock bottom because everything that I knew in this life had been kind of removed. All of these constructs had been removed. Everything that I was leaning on for my affirmation, for my identity, all of those things had been taken out from under me. And so here I was like, so who am I without these things? And I just remember having a dialogue with the Lord, not audible, but just having this conversation with the Lord in my heart saying, what do I do? Do I get to file for divorce? Does he get to file for divorce? What does that look like? And I was really concerned about my rights. Let me just tell you, I was so concerned about what are my rights? And God just stopped me through his Holy Spirit and said, hang on, you've got a lot of questions, but until you get a few things straight, none of that really matters. Either I'm God or I'm not. And either I'm good or I'm not. And either I'm for you or I'm not. But until you get those things settled in your heart, your other questions actually don't matter. And I'll tell you, Amber, I am not ashamed to say at this moment, like I was offended. And I don't know if anyone, that's listening or watching has ever gotten to the point where they are offended at God, but I was offended. Like, what do you mean? Why would you ask me such things? I had been a Christian at that point for, almost 20 years. And it was like, what do you mean? And then it was just silent. And I knew in my spirit that, God doesn't tend to ask us questions he already has the answer to. He has all the answers anyway. So he's not asking because he doesn't know. He's asking because I clearly am not sure about some of these things, even though I believe that I am. And so I said, well, okay, as a confession of my faith, you are God and you are good and you are for me. And then he just responded, again, not audibly, but as clear as day in my heart. And he just said, okay, so stand for your marriage and let's stop talking about this. And I was stunned. I had never even heard of that term. I didn't know what he was talking about. I think I was walking through Target when this happened. So it wasn't like what was I going to do with that information? And so I just remember getting home and Googling, what does it mean to stand for your marriage? Because that's where we go for all of our answers, right? And so I Googled and I found a couple of really great and helpful ministries that were doing just that. They had heard a very similar call on their lives to stand in the gap for their marriage, to stand for the things that God was standing for. And so that was the beginning of the journey for me about 7 years ago. And the reality of what that looks like, because I know that there's a lot of people in our world, whether you are a Christian or not, whether you're in a church or not, the divorce rate is the same as it is outside of the church. And so I know who I'm talking to. And I know that there are people that I'm talking to who have been down a similar path, that they have initiated a divorce or they have been on the receiving end of a divorce. And my story is never specifically about should you or should you not get divorced, because that is really between you and the Lord. And God knows what that story is. And that's something between you and him to have that conversation about. And what I'm also not advocating for is being or staying in an abusive relationship. That's not what
Yeah.
this was. I was not being abused. As a matter of fact, full confession and vulnerability, I was the abusive one. I was the one that was verbally abusive, at times physically abusive. I mean, I'm a healthy Enneagram 8 now, but there was a time where in my wounding I wasn't. And if you know anything about 8s, you don't want them to be unhealthy. There's a lot of rage and there's a lot of violent issues that can come up. And a lot of that really was just undealt with stuff. And unfortunately, it all came to a head at one point. And so I do understand why my husband needed to leave at the time, for safety, for himself, for our kids, for me, for all the things. But what it really came down to, and what I would want to say to people is, it's really about what God has called you to do. And it's about being faithful to what God has asked of you. And it's about being obedient and leaning in and trusting him that if he's called you to do something, he's going to be with you in it. He's Emmanuel, God with us. So it wasn't like he was giving me an assignment and then leaving me and saying, good luck, hope you figure out how this works. Because I come from a divorced family. My husband comes from a divorced family. We didn't have a model for what that looked like in our lives. And so that's really been the journey for me over the last 7 years, is completely relying on God in not just spiritual ways, in very practical, mental, emotional, physical, financial, relational ways for God to say to me, this is what I'm calling you to do. And if you will be faithful to me, I will be faithful to you. And I will be a husband to you and a father to your children. And so in the everyday life, I'm a single person. I am a single mom. I, have to pay my own bills. I have to, plan my own things. I'm a single person. I really am. But spiritually speaking, there are the courts of man and there's the courts of heaven, and the courts of heaven still see us as married. And so I walk as a married woman through this life. I don't put myself in situations of compromise the way you wouldn't as a married person. The things that how you would carry yourself as a married woman is how I carry myself.
That's incredible, Carla. Like, every time, it's not the first time I've heard this story. And every time I hear it, I am like, the first time I heard it was on Clubhouse.
Well, there you have it.
I was like, Carla's on here. What's Carla doing? And then, which is interesting to me because I know vulnerability is not something that you had been super comfortable with.
Yeah.
And so to hear you share this story on Clubhouse, to tell me when we were at dinner, to be willing to share it with our viewers, I am in awe of you, because it is different. And God calls us to be different. I was talking with the pastor this morning, and his word to the group of us was, we need to act as though we are aliens and like strangers to this life, to this world. We are way too comfortable in this world. And I am guilty as sin. Like, I have caught myself. I love my home life. I love my friends. I've got a great marriage now with a ton of work, I often say, gosh, I wish my work life would look like my home life, because then, we'd have it all put together in a perfect little package. And after hearing Pastor Rashad say that this morning, I was like, oh, wait, he doesn't want us to be comfortable. He wants us to be in Christ. And he does not want us to see that this is our home, because this is the short stop. We are headed to and there is much more joy on the other side of this life. So of course, we're going to take the easy path though. And you're not taking the easy path where your marriage is concerned.
No, it not easy at all. But in reality, there is no easy path with that, right? I think that's a misnomer, that there is an easy path at all. This life is not easy. But I think the question that I had to ask within myself was, do I want to take the path where I'm walking this out on my own? Or do I want to take the path where God has assured me he will be with me? And that's the path. And if nobody else was going to walk that path with me, including my spouse, if God was with me, that was going to be enough, because then the onus is on him. The burden is on him, is on God, because he's the one that's called me to it. And so the reality is that if I took the other path and said, no, that doesn't look right, that doesn't feel comfortable to me at all, then the burden is on me to make that path work for me. And so in this way, it really comes down to, I might be a responsible party in this, like in terms of the everyday execution, but you're the accountable party, God. Like, if you want me to buy this house and this is how much I'm earning at my job, you're going to have to make that work out. Like, that's on you because you're calling me to this. And that's really just how I flow in that relationship. But I think the big part of getting back to your original question about maturity and pruning, what it really came down to was this idea that my identity wasn't wrapped up in a box that I checked on a form. We check these boxes: what's your marital status, what's your parenting status, what's your employment status. But the reality is that those things are fluid. They change. And the truth is that they're just assignments. They're not our identity. They're not even our calling. They're just assignments. And what God has called us to be is faithful in our assignment. And what he's calling me to be is faithful in this assignment. This is my assignment, is to be married to this man, because the vows that we took were covenant vows. And so the covenant is until death. So until one or the other of us dies, this covenant is still in play, because we not only made a covenant with each other, we made a covenant with God, and God hasn't reneged on his side. So the covenant is still in play. And so that's really what that looks like. And it comes also from a desire within my heart to give to my children a spiritual inheritance of fidelity and faithfulness, and not of divorce. So that's, I leave kind of the outcomes to God of what that's going to look like.
And I'm sure that has showed up in other places in your life where you have been able to use this level of discipline and obedience to get to where you are today. So what do you think, well, before we do that, what do you think the gift that you received through this process was? And then I'll ask the other.
Yeah. Well, I think, just to reiterate, I think the gift is my identity, my true identity based on intimacy with Christ.
Yes.
Where it doesn't actually matter what my marital status is. It doesn't actually matter whether or not I have biological kids or spiritual kids or kids at home, or I'm an empty nester. It doesn't actually matter what my title is at work, or, how many likes I get on an Instagram, post, or how much money is in my bank account. Those things don't matter. They are just assignments and areas of stewardship for me in this life. But that ultimately the gift is, okay, I know who I am when none of those things are prospering. This is still who I am. And really who I am is I'm the daughter of a king. And that is my now identity, and it's my eternal identity. Who I am is the bride of Christ. And that's my now identity, and it's my eternal identity. And who I am is I'm a co-heir and a co-ruler and a co-reigner with Christ. That's who I'm called to be. And so anything and everything in this life is just preparing me to walk more fully into that for all of eternity. And so, I've been, for example, in jobs that have been the worst, the worst, not great bosses, toxic environments. I'm sure I'm the only one that's experienced that. But, in those assignments, it's really easy to just be like, I'm out of here. I'm going to quit. I'm going to go. But until God says it's time to go, it's not time to go. And the truth of the matter is that I hang on and I wait and I focus on what I can focus on, which is working with excellence, working with integrity, leaving my situation well, setting my team up for success. And then when God says it's time to go, it's time to go. He's got another assignment for me, and I can leave, with full assurance that that's my time and that I didn't abandon ship before it was time.
I love this so much. it's something that is so needed to be heard right now, because especially in my life, but I know in several others' lives too, we're kind of going through some of the similar stuff in this walk, and it's relative in your marriage, in jobs, in relationships with your family. Like, it's all relative. So my next question is, how has this played out in other areas of your life?
The faithfulness factor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, like I said, I think with work, it has allowed me to have a spirit of endurance and perseverance.
Mm-hmm.
And it's allowed me to let God control the timeline of things, because
Mm-hmm.
again, it's all about maturity. When we look at maturity in the Bible, for example, in John 15, which is about the vine and the branches, the whole purpose of maturity is for us to bring glory to God. So that's, Jesus says, I am the vine, you are the branches, right? Abide in me. For what purpose? It's to bear fruit, and not just to bear fruit,
Yes.
but abundant fruit and fruit that remains. And so when we do that, when we bear fruit, when we bear abundant fruit and fruit that remains, that is maturity, right? When you look at fruit and you call it mature, it means it's ripe. It's ready for what it was born for.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we want to be. We want to be mature. We want to be complete. We want to be ready for what we were born for, because when we do that and when we walk in those things, that brings glory to God and it brings good to others.
Yes. Yes. I'm so glad that you brought up abundance, because like I said, Carla, you are one of the most abundant humans I have ever met in my life, who is walking this walk faithfully in her marriage, in your job, but everything is joyful. Everything, you are so full of abundance all the time. And I think that for so many people, that's where they're striving to get to. Is where everything feels abundant, and not in this scarce, like there's not enough love, there's not enough time, there's not enough work, there's not enough people, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You illuminate abundance, but I know that that's taken the maturity and the pruning. So you do some fun things.
I do.
You do. So let's talk about what you do, or what you have done, and you encourage other people to get to that place of abundance.
Yeah. Well, are you talking about like my retreats, or
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, again, this started for me as more of an emergency pit stop than it did like, hey, this is a great idea. I had been experiencing some health issues as a result of not taking care of myself. I think a lot of people can probably relate to that. This is a hustle culture. This is a 24/7 culture. The last year and a half obviously has contributed quite a bit to that, because home is work and work is home and school and all the things. And it's just really difficult to turn things off and unplug. And so, I was in probably a couple of situations where career-wise, I just do the most. That's just who I am. And I don't tend to be great at self-care, I'll tell you that. And so I had hit a point where I was dealing with some health issues that were impacting, would have long-term impact and implications. Mm-hmm. And I had a doctor say, you need to rest. And I was like, I don't even understand what you're telling me. I don't understand those words. What does that even mean? And so I have a wonderful biblical counselor who I brought this to, and I said, I don't know what this means. What do you mean rest? Does this just mean sleep more hours a night? And he had said, well, before you can rest, you actually have to relax. So when was the last time you went on a vacation and did nothing? And I said, I've never been on a vacation and done nothing, because for me, it's like, if I'm going to pay the money, I want to get the most out of that situation. And so it was like, I've never been on a vacation where I've done nothing. And then I remembered there was one time I did go on a vacation that I did almost nothing. And it was a week that I spent in Gulf Shores with my kids. We rented a condo. We went to the grocery store. We brought all the frozen pizza and all, the things. And I was like, take care of yourselves for a week. Mind you, they were in their late teens, early 20s. So it wasn't like little kids. But it was like, here's all the food. We're not sightseeing. We're not, going out all the time. We're 2 steps from the beach. So this is just where we are. And that was probably the closest I've ever been to a vacation where I did nothing. but what I was sharing with my counselor was that's not practical. I live in Indianapolis. That's Gulf Shores. That's a 12-hour drive. That's not a day trip. I can't sustain that financially. It was an expensive investment. And then I realized, oh, wait, what if I found something closer? Maybe it's not a condo by the beach, but what if I found something closer? And so I had saved in my Airbnb app this cute little place in Fort Wayne, Indiana called the Tiny Shed. And so I thought, well, that's okay. I've been wanting to check it out. I'm just going to do it. It's an hour and a half drive. It's, $50 a night. I can afford this. I can afford it in my budget, in my financial budget. I can afford it in my time budget because I could just take like one day off work and go over the course of a weekend and it's going to be fine. And so I went, and my very first retreat, all I did was cry and sleep. And I felt like a baby. I felt like an infant. And I didn't realize that I had had so much stuff built up because, as we talked about, when you're just going and going and going, you don't necessarily feel that implication. It's almost like adrenaline, but reversed. It was just like, I just have to keep my head down and keep this thing moving. And so I went, and it was fantastic. And by the end of that trip, I got a little bit of clarity, and I thought, no, I need to do this more often. I need to do this on a regular basis. And so I booked 3 months later, I booked my next stay. And so what started off as let me just do this one time to get some extra, sleep in, actually turned into a quarterly personal retreat. And so I've been taking them now for a couple of years. I go to the same place, but every time it's different. It's a different experience every time. And the reason that is because I come prepared. So I bring everything that I think I'm going to need. I bring my laptop, my journal, my Bible. I bring my essential oils diffuser. I bring a mini speaker so I can play worship music. I bring food sometimes. Like, it just depends. But what I do is I leave the agenda up to God, and I let God decide what we're doing that weekend. And that is part of that process of rest. It is entrusting to God to do what only God can do. And it's acknowledging that it's you that's making this happen. So I may plant and I may water, but it's you that's going to cause the increase. And it's a willing act of surrender on my part to say, in every other area of my life, I am a leader. I'm a leader in my job. I'm a leader in my home. I'm a leader, in my community. But in this case, I don't have to be the leader. I get to be led. You get to be my father in this place. You get to be my good shepherd. You get to be my great physician. You get to be for me all the things. And this entire space is for you to come and speak to me. And sometimes he has me do planning things. And sometimes he has me do leisurely things. He knows more than I do what my soul and my spirit and my body need. And so it's an act of surrender. But that's also part of it, is recognizing that, like, hey, I don't always have to be the one in charge.
I love that idea.
Yes.
And I haven't done it yet. I talk about it. It's something that they talked highly about in our Rise and Thrive program. And we went away for an overnight for that experience, but we were in the experience. We were doing things with people. Right. I think hearing you say that, I'm almost afraid of being alone with myself.
I know. It is. It was a little scary at first, but now I look forward to it. And people know around me, when they start to see me get a little bit on edge, they're like, when's your next retreat? Because they know, like, okay, she's gearing up for it. Yeah, and it is. It's scary. It's a place of vulnerability in that, like I said, the first one, all I did was cry and sleep. And it was like, are you kidding me? But no, but why? Nobody else is there. Nobody else is seeing that. And that's the other aspect of it, is that it's not a joint retreat. It's not like I'm going with other people. It's not part of a religious order or anything. It's my time to get away with the Lord. It's an extended time of Sabbath with him to let him speak the things to me that he wants to speak. And he's got a lot to say.
Yes, he does. And I'm like, with having raised 5 kids, with working full time, with doing all the mom things and all the work things, I just never considered that I would need something like that. And It's been 20 years.
Yeah. You 100% need this.
Can you imagine how much is layered on all of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's definitely on the list for this year. So in that, I bet I would put money that that's where Clarity Carla came from.
You know, it's so funny. Clarity Carla came as a result of this, but not during that trip. So one of my retreats I took was in January of 2020, and I was at the end of an assignment. I didn't know when it was going to end. I didn't know how. I didn't know if I was going to leave. I didn't know if I was going to get fired. Spoiler alert, I got fired. But I was on my way up to the tiny shed and I was praying and I said, Lord, I need clarity. I need clarity for the next step. Am I supposed to stay in this same vertical and just find a different company to do this in? Am I supposed to bridge over and do something totally different, but with the same skill sets, just a different title? I didn't know what I was supposed to do. And so I thought, well, here again, I think the choice is mine, but I'd like some clarity because you see way further down the road. And so that was my prayer. And when I got up to that retreat, I did a couple of things. One of them is I read a book by Jordan Rayner called Master of One. I was actually on his book launch team. And so I had a launch copy of the book. And I read that, and that really helped me to get clarity because it was like, of all the gifts and talents that you have, if you funneled it down to how you most show up, the one thing, your superpower, your zone of genius, however you want to call it, what's the one thing that God's called you to be a master of, that you are, unusually gifted at, like maybe more than anybody else? That was the one book. And then the other thing was that before I unplugged, I checked my email and I was like, just in case I missed something. And there happened to be an email in there from Hopewriters, which is the company that I work for now, that the subject line in the email said, "We're hiring Chief Operating Officer." And I will tell you that prior to that, I would not have even considered a role like that had I not had a friend say to me, the work that you're doing right now in other companies is a chief operating officer. And I was like, really? But I don't have a master's. I don't have this. I don't have that. And he said, you don't need any of that. You have real life practical experience and natural gifting. And so it was a combination of all those things. And I came out of that weekend and I ended up applying for that job. And 60 days later, I got the job.
Out of how many people?
There was over 950 applicants for that position.
That's right.
So, and it was through being hired at that company, actually, which is where I got the name Clarity Carla, because one of the team members had called me that. She was just like, I know what we're going to call you. We're going to call you Clarity Carla because whenever you're in a meeting, that's what you bring. And I thought, okay, I guess. But here's the funny thing about that. Because she started calling me that, other people started calling me that within the organization. And then now everyone within the organization calls me that. But the more they called me that, the more I leaned into it. And then the stronger I became. And Marcus Buckingham talks about that, that your strengths are what make you stronger. Like when you do them, you actually get stronger. Yep. And I noticed the more they call me this, the more I step into it, the stronger I become, the more they call me that. And now people outside of Hopewriters call me Clarity Carla. It's actually now a thing. It's my brand.
It's on your coffee mug.
It is on my coffee mug. Look at that. Shout out to Rebecca Fleetwood Hessian, who got this made for me.
Yes, I knew it. Yes. So that's your superpower, Clarity Carla.
Well, you know what? It is. It really is. It's bringing clarity out of chaos. It's being a barrier remover for people. It's like kinking the line, if you will, so that the water can flow. It's about clearing a path for people. So it's all of those things, which are leadership gifts, which I've always stepped into places of leadership over the course of my life. But, that really, I think my one thing is clarity.
I love that. And it's something that, like I said, is so needed. People are looking for the clear path, but they're looking for it in all the wrong areas, And what I love about, because you've done it for me, when I'm looking for clarity, you just bring me back to God. You bring me back to the source of what are you looking for? Because He's got the answers for you. he just may not be ready to reveal them. You have all the answers that you need for today.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Then I don't have to work so hard. I don't have to think so hard about this because he's already got it laid out for me. I just need to be.
Right.
And that's what this broadcast is about, bringing those gifts to the surface and then showing where they make impact in the world. And you have shown a beautiful, like from beginning to end, of how even back when you were working through your marriage, what you were searching for was that clarity. And allowing you, not trying to control that, you just allowing God to do what he does for you. And he gave it to you and you're at complete peace with it.
I am at peace with it.
Yeah. And you cause it in other people. That's the beauty of it. So I say this all the time. I have this quote that sits in my office and it says, the meaning of life is to find your gift and the purpose of it is to give it away. And it's William Shakespeare. And it is, you do it so beautifully.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I love it. So a couple things. So we've already talked about your gifts. We've already talked about your retreats. Is there, see if there was so much more, but we don't have enough time today to go through all the things. I will include all of Carla's information in the show notes. So to get a hold of her, she's Coffee with Carla and Just Passing Through on Instagram. You're on Facebook, you're on LinkedIn, you're on YouTube, you're all the places. But I wanted to leave our friends with, what do you want to leave behind in the world once you're gone? What's your legacy?
I think my legacy that I would be really proud to leave behind are mature disciples of Christ. That everything that I do, whatever assignment God has given me, whatever he has entrusted me with, that I would do it with such a level of excellence and intentionality and faithfulness that, as I mentioned before with John 15, it's like that it would lead others to see and give glory to God, and that they would know Jesus as their Lord and Savior, that they would, whether they're already Christians now and they're being called to a higher level in their relationship with the Lord, or they're not yet believers and they see something in me that is different than what they're seeing in the world, and that causes them to be curious. But it's not enough to be born. You have to grow and mature. And so I think that my gift mix, if you will, the things that I've been called to, isn't just birthing people into a place. It's being Mama Hayden. It's helping them grow up in their faith, in the ways in which they carry themselves, in their marriages, in their parenting, in the marketplace. Being a grown-up is my platform. I mean, more than anything else, my marriage story is just part of my story, but it's not the story. And so really it is coming alongside the work of the Holy Spirit and helping people to be grown-ups.
I love that. And it's so true. And this really is a beautiful tie-in back to the first episode, because Tawana talked about, first she talked about being a kind human and how we have to be kind to each other. And this podcast is about also courageously loving yourself so that you can love others. And a lot of the reasons why being a grown-up is hard is because we have not dealt with the traumas from our childhood. So it's like you said, when you were on your retreat, you were like a baby again, crying and sleeping. And it's because there are things that have happened in between, youth and adulthood, trying to be a grown-up that just haven't been dealt with. Right. Tawana talked about that too. She talked about how, she was like a 6-year-old little girl again, because someone said something one time and it took her back to that place because that hurt. And trauma doesn't have to look like, all the bad things that we hear. Trauma is just anything that you believe about yourself that isn't true.
Right. Trauma is an injury to your identity is really what it is. And so whether that is a trauma, it's an absence of good things that you should have had. So maybe there wasn't abuse, but you were neglected, or you didn't have both parents in the home, or you didn't have money to provide for your basic needs. That's A trauma, the absence of good things. And then there's B trauma, and it's when bad things happen to you. Yeah. And I think sometimes there are those of us in the A trauma camp, if you will, that feel like, well, what do I have to even say? Because I didn't have it like that person over there that had B trauma.
Right.
But either one of those things is an injury to our identity. And God has come to heal those places. And so part of growing up and being a grown-up and part of maturing, not only in your faith, but in your personhood, is having that sense of belonging and having, if it's not your natural parents, having spiritual parents that can come around and nurture you in those places where you've been injured so that you can heal from that. And then your growth isn't stunted. And then you can go on and be mature in the things of the Lord.
And it's always a journey. We're always on that journey. The grooming and the maturing and the pruning never stops, because every day, we want to be more Christ-like, and we're going to fall down, and thank God that we are forever covered, that when we professed, because I think it's the thing that sometimes doesn't get taught appropriately, or we forget. You don't have to carry around a bunch of shame and blame for things that happen to you. You're already covered. You're going to fall off the horse. Just get back up, because he's always there, ride or die with you. So, Carla, thank you so much. This was so much fun.
Oh my gosh, it was such a pleasure. Thank you so much. Maybe the Lord will have me back for season 2.
He will absolutely have you back for season 2, because like I said, we have so much to talk about, and you have so much to give to the world. And so I love to have this platform for you to share and to be the light and to help other people lift up into their gifts, have clarity, and live their best life too. So thank you so much, sister. I hope to see you very soon in person.
Absolutely. Thanks, Amber.
Take care, honey.